The email on my screen glowed with the cold light of a final verdict. The Sterling Legacy Fund distribution is contingent upon a continuous marital status of no less than 5 years, with no separation filings. My hand was unsteady as I forwarded it to my encrypted cloud server, the last piece of the puzzle falling into its designated slot. Outside, the pale Chicago dawn tried to break through the heavy silk drapes Leo had insisted upon, drapes that had cost more than my entire law school education. I snapped my laptop shut just as the master bathroom door opened. A cloud of steam rolled out, followed by Leo, a towel slung low on his hips, his physique still impressive at 37. But his eyes, they held that vacant quality I had been meticulously documenting for the past year. "Happy birthday, Ava," he murmured, the words feeling pre-recorded and hollow. He leaned in to kiss my cheek, but his lips were cool, a strange contrast to the heat of his recent shower. Mother is thrilled about tonight. Before we continue, I'd like to thank you all for joining me on this wild ride. If you're finding strength in these stories of taking back control, please think about subscribing. It costs nothing and you become part of this powerful community. Now back to the story. I'm sure she is, I thought. But my reply was polished with practiced warmth. It was incredibly generous of Genevieve to plan all of this. My voice, the same one I'd honed in courtrooms to persuade juries, gave no hint of the frost forming around my heart. "What are you working on?" he asked, his gaze falling on my closed laptop. "Just going over the Westbrook merger files one last time." I lied with practiced ease. "Even on your birthday, there are no days off at Thorne Blackwood." He just nodded, swallowing the explanation without a second thought. 6 years ago, when we first met, he would have teased me for being a workaholic, probably trying to pull me back into bed. But that version of Leo was gone, replaced by this polished shell of a man who moved and spoke according to his family's cues, like a marionette on a string. As he began dressing for his day at the family's financial office, I made my retreat to the walk-in closet. It was the only space in our sprawling Gold Coast penthouse that was free of surveillance. Genevieve had the system installed during our renovation last year, framing it as a thoughtful security upgrade for her precious son and his wife. Only I knew about the microscopic lenses I'd found during a systematic 3-month-long sweep of the apartment. And only I knew that I'd left them all active, feeding them a continuous loop of mundane, routine footage whenever I needed true privacy. Inside the closet, I pressed my thumb against a nearly invisible line in the custom cabinetry. A panel slid open silently, revealing a fireproof case. Inside were multiple hard drives, a ghost laptop, and 3 unregistered burner phones. My insurance, my arsenal. For 4 years, I had been the flawless addition to the Sterling dynasty. A top-of-her-class Yale law graduate, a rising star at Chicago's most formidable corporate law firm, a board member for prestigious charities, and the devoted wife of Leo Sterling, the sole heir to one of the Midwest's most established fortunes. The society columns adored our story. Genevieve paraded me at every gala and fundraiser like a prized mare. No one ever looked beyond the carefully constructed image to see the woman who was methodically building a case to tear the entire Sterling empire down from the inside. It had all started with small inconsistencies I stumbled upon while helping Leo review some of his family's business documents. Figures that didn't quite reconcile, shadowy subsidiaries registered in nations known for their lax banking regulations. Then came the unsettling shifts in Leo's behavior after his private meetings. He would return more distant, his confidence replaced with a strange passivity. And there were the family gatherings where Genevieve would whisper something in his ear, and his entire demeanor would change in an instant. I had spent 3 years defending corporations against allegations of high-level fraud. I knew the scent of financial manipulation, and I also recognized the textbook signs of psychological control. The day I found Leo staring blankly at a video sent by his cousin Julian was the day my clandestine investigation began in earnest. I bought the first burner phone that very night. From my hidden cache, I pulled out a micro SD card and slipped it into my secure phone. The encrypted folders held everything: wire transfers to offshore accounts, audio recordings of family meetings where they discussed, in chillingly casual terms, how to condition certain responses in Leo, hard evidence of insider trading and payoffs to city officials. My fingers scrolled to the latest edition, photographs taken just yesterday of Dr. Alastair Finch, Leo's supposed childhood therapist, meeting with Genevieve at her private Lincoln Park residence. Dr. Finch was the same man listed in internal documents as a behavioral consultant, receiving a retainer of $25,000 a month from a Sterling Shell Corporation. I glanced at my watch. 7:15 a.m. It was almost time to put the mask of Ava Sterling back on. I put everything back, secured the hidden panel, and chose a sharp, conservative Armani suit for my court appearance that morning. The Prescott hearing would be over by noon, leaving me just enough time to get ready for my birthday gala at Genevieve's preferred venue, the Pinnacle Club. As I applied my makeup, I rehearsed my expressions in the mirror. Delighted surprise, gracious appreciation, adoring affection. The very same masks I had worn for years while I gathered the evidence against the people who had hollowed out my husband and were running a criminal enterprise from behind a philanthropic front. Leo appeared in the doorway, looking immaculate in a custom-tailored suit, his hair perfectly coiffed. There was a time when the sight of him like this would have made my heart race. Now I found myself dispassionately cataloging the subtle changes in him, the slight constriction of his pupils, the microsecond delay before he formed an emotional response, the new, persistent tension in his jaw. "You look beautiful," he said, the compliment delivered by rote. "Thank you, darling." I stood and adjusted his tie, which was already perfect, searching his eyes for any spark of the man I had married. There was nothing. "I'll see you tonight. Try to keep your mother from going too overboard with the surprises." His smile was a perfect curve, but it never reached his eyes. "She just wants everything to be perfect for you." Perfect. That was the Sterling's favorite word. Their perfect family, their perfect reputation, their perfect control. As I gathered my briefcase, my personal phone buzzed. A text from Genevieve. "Wear the blue Chanel tonight. Leo adores you in that color." Another command masquerading as a motherly suggestion. I typed back a thankful reply, then turned to my closet and selected the stunning crimson Dior I'd been saving. These small acts of defiance were what kept me sane as I built my case. In the rideshare to the courthouse, I dove into my actual casework, compartmentalizing my life as I had trained myself to do. By day, I was still Ava Sterling, corporate defense attorney. My clients depended on me, and ironically, the very skills I used to defend them were the ones I was now using to build a devastating case against the Sterlings. At the courthouse steps, I checked my secure messaging app. My contact at the SEC had confirmed they'd received my latest data drop. "Moving on this next week," he'd written. "Need anything more from your source?" A small smile played on my lips as I typed my reply. "One final piece coming tonight." Genevieve had no idea that the elaborate trap she was setting for me at my own birthday party was about to become the stage for the Sterling's public unmasking. Tonight, surrounded by Chicago's elite and the family's most powerful allies, everything was going to change. I put the phone away and walked up the courthouse steps, my expression composed, my posture unshakable. Inside, I was counting down the hours. The perfect facade was about to be obliterated, and I would be there, phone in hand, to record every single damning second. The Pinnacle Club shimmered at the top of a downtown skyscraper, its floor-to-ceiling windows capturing the setting sun over Lake Michigan in a blaze of gold and crimson. A fitting palette, I mused, for an evening that promised to be a bloodbath disguised as a birthday party. The venue had a 6-month wait list for a single table, but the Sterling name had secured not just a reservation, but the entire exclusive rooftop terrace. "Mrs. Sterling, welcome." The maitre d' was practically bowing as our car pulled up. "Mrs. Genevieve has been expecting you." "I'm sure she has," I said under my breath, taking Leo's offered arm, which felt stiff and mechanical. He'd been completely silent during the ride over, glancing at his watch every few minutes as if timing a performance. The private elevator ascended in a smooth, silent glide, and I used those few moments to steel myself. My crimson Dior felt less like a dress and more like a suit of armor. The color was a silent declaration of war against Genevieve's blue Chanel directive. Leo hadn't even registered my act of defiance, just another sign of how detached he had become. The elevator doors opened onto a meticulously crafted scene. Crystal chandeliers hung as if suspended in mid-air, creating a canopy of artificial stars against the panoramic city view. White roses, Genevieve's signature flower, were everywhere, and arranged throughout the space were some 50 guests, all of them smiling with the practiced ease of circling predators. Happy birthday. The chorus of greetings washed over me, as artificial as the scent of the roses. Genevieve glided toward me, a vision in navy blue Givenchy, her silver hair gleaming. At 65, she was still a formidable presence, the undisputed queen of Chicago society, whose ruthlessness was matched only by her talent for hiding it. "Darling Ava," she said, pulling me into an embrace. Her expensive perfume enveloped me like a sweet poison. Her lips brushed my cheek as she whispered, "Just for me, the blue would have complemented Leo so much better for the photographers." I smiled back, my own warmth just as steely as hers. I wanted to surprise everyone, even on my birthday. A flicker of annoyance crossed her eyes, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her in months. She recovered in a heartbeat, linking her arm through mine to begin parading me through my own party. "Everyone who matters is here," she announced, steering me past the city's power brokers, the chief of police, a state senator, a federal judge, 2 university presidents. I took mental inventory of each face, cross-referencing them with my files on the Sterling's network of influence. None of my partners from the law firm were present, not my best friend from Yale, not a single person who had a genuine connection to me, Ava, the individual. The guest list had been carefully purged, leaving only those who would unquestioningly side with the family. Anyone who might notice if the real Ava were to disappear behind the Sterling veneer. Champagne birthday girl? Julian Sterling, Leo's cousin and the family's legal cleaner, materialized at my side with 2 flutes. "Thank you, Julian." I took one but didn't drink. "Lovely of you to be here." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," he replied. His Ivy League accent stretched thin over something tense and urgent. His eyes kept darting toward the entrance, where I saw a distinguished-looking man with silver hair in a charcoal suit being discreetly escorted in. "Excuse me a moment." I watched as Julian went to intercept the new arrival, Dr. Alistair Finch. The childhood therapist whose methods seemed to extend far beyond any conventional therapy. The man who was on the payroll as a behavioral maintenance consultant. A server passing with appetizers gave me the perfect excuse to drift closer to their conversation. "The timeline has to be accelerated," Julian was saying, his back to the main party. "The fund administrators won't grant another extension." "Pushing the protocol risks instability," Finch replied, his clinical tone unmistakable even in a hushed voice. "The conditioning requires—" "We don't have that luxury anymore," Julian cut in. "The contractual obligations are non-negotiable. If he isn't fully compliant by the disbursement date..." They noticed my approach, and the conversation immediately pivoted to pleasantries. Finch's handshake was brief, his eyes scanning me with a cold, analytical detachment. "Mrs. Sterling, a very happy birthday," he said. "You look radiant." "Thank you, Dr. Finch. Leo mentioned you might be here," I lied smoothly. "It's been, 15 years since you last worked with him." His smile grew tight at the edges. "Here and there. The Sterlings are more like family than clients." "How wonderful for everyone involved," I replied, noting the slight dilation of his pupils. He was on edge. Good. For the next hour, I moved through the room, playing my part while observing the intricate power dynamics. Genevieve was the constant epicenter, her laughter a theatrical performance, her eyes never straying from me for long. Whenever Leo and I were near each other, her focus intensified, as if she were monitoring a critical experiment. Leo himself drifted through the party like a man in a dream, offering programmed responses to guests. On 2 separate occasions, I caught Dr. Finch watching our interactions, making subtle notes on his phone. "What a wonderful turnout," commented Judge Atherton, one of the Sterling's oldest allies. "Genevieve certainly knows how to throw a party for family." Indeed, I agreed, though I was surprised none of my colleagues from the firm could attend. He chuckled. An exclusive list. Genevieve was very particular about keeping this an intimate affair. By intimate, he meant a controlled environment. A prickle of vulnerability ran down my spine. This party was a sealed chamber. Every single person here would rally around the Sterlings if anything were to happen to me. The party transitioned to dinner, with Genevieve directing the seating arrangement with tactical precision. I was placed with Leo to my right, her at the head of the table, and Dr. Finch positioned directly across from me, his gaze clinically observing every interaction between me and Leo. Genevieve tapped her crystal glass, bringing the room to a hush. Before our meal, a toast to my wonderful daughter-in-law. She rose to her feet, holding the room captive. 5 years ago, Leo brought home this brilliant, beautiful lawyer, and I knew right away she was special. Her eyes locked with mine, warm on the surface but with an Arctic chill beneath. Ava has become the embodiment of every Sterling family value, loyal, discreet, and utterly committed to our legacy. The room murmured its approval. I held my grateful smile, mentally translating her real message. "We own you." To Ava, Genevieve said, raising her glass, "May this 36th year be transformative." The word hung in the air, feeling less like a wish and more like a threat. As the servers brought out the first course, Genevieve glided behind my chair, her manicured hands resting on my shoulders. To anyone watching, it was a gesture of maternal affection. I felt the predatory weight of her grip. "Such a perfect night," she murmured, her voice pitched just for me to hear. "And after dinner, we have a very special announcement to make about the family's future." Her fingers tightened for a fraction of a second on my shoulder before she moved away, leaving the scent of her perfume and the distinct feeling of a trap about to be sprung. I glanced at Leo and found his eyes fixated on his water glass, his fingers tapping a nervous, rhythmic pattern I had documented in my notes, a behavior that always followed a private directive from Genevieve. Whatever they had planned for tonight, it was happening soon. The gift presentation would be after the main course. That would be Genevieve's chosen moment for her grand, orchestrated announcement. I touched the sleek phone in my clutch, feeling the reassuring hardness of its case. It was ready to record. My federal contacts were on standby, waiting for my signal. The first course arrived. Oysters on the half shell, arranged in a perfect, glistening circle. From the head of the table, Genevieve beamed at me, raising her glass in another silent toast. I smiled back, lifting my own untouched glass of champagne. Let the show begin. The main course was cleared, and an expectant silence fell over the terrace. Genevieve gave a subtle nod to the staff, who then wheeled out a large marble-topped table laden with exquisitely wrapped gifts. It was all part of the performance, gifts that I knew were as hollow as the smiles of the people around me. "Before we have dessert," Genevieve announced, her voice effortlessly commanding the room, "we simply must spoil our birthday girl." The guests rearranged themselves into a neat semicircle, their smartphones emerging from pockets and purses. A few years ago, this kind of attention would have made me deeply uncomfortable. Tonight, I welcomed every single camera. Leo guided me toward the gift table, his hand pressed firmly on the small of my back. His touch, which once felt so warm and protective, now felt like a programmed, mechanical gesture. Start with this one, Genevieve instructed, handing me a small, square box wrapped in the signature blue of a famous jeweler. A collective sigh of appreciation went through the crowd. I accepted it with my well-rehearsed smile, unwrapping it with deliberate slowness. Inside, nestled on a bed of white satin, was a platinum tennis bracelet, heavy with diamonds, a beautiful, glittering manacle. "It's gorgeous," I said, holding it up for the obligatory photos. "Leo, help your wife put it on," Genevieve directed. As he clasped it around my wrist, I felt its cold weight. Another link in the chain they were forging around me. The show went on through several more presents, each one expensive and impersonal, chosen to reinforce my status as a sterling possession. A designer handbag, a key to their estate in the Hamptons, a sizable donation made in my name to the Sterling Foundation. And now, Genevieve's voice dropped, becoming dramatically soft for our very special announcement. She glided forward, her movements so perfectly timed they felt choreographed. The scent of her perfume arrived a moment before she did, coiling around me like an invisible serpent. The room became utterly still. All eyes were on the three of us, Genevieve, Leo, and me, arranged like pieces on a chessboard. Her hand came to rest on Leo's shoulder, her fingers pressing into the fabric of his suit at precise points I had documented in my research on physical triggers. "Ava has been such a wonderful asset to our family," Genevieve began, her voice dripping with false sentiment. "Devoted, supportive. The perfect partner for Leo during these last 5 critical years. 5 years. The exact time frame stipulated by the Legacy Fund." Genevieve's eyes glittered as she leaned closer to Leo, her lips almost brushing his ear. With a discreet movement of my thumb, I activated the recording function on the phone in my clutch. "Remember your duty," she whispered, but in the profound silence of the room, the words carried. "Protect what is ours." I watched it unfold as if in slow motion. Leo's pupils contracted to pinpricks. His jaw went slack for a moment, then clenched into a rigid line. The slight tremor I'd noticed in his hand earlier ceased completely. Then he spoke, his voice flat and unfamiliar, a tone I had never heard from him before. "You've betrayed us." A collective gasp went through the room. Genevieve stepped back slightly, a flicker of dark satisfaction in her eyes as she watched her creation perform on cue. "What are you talking about, Leo?" I asked, my own voice perfectly steady, betraying none of the electric current of anticipation shooting through me. "We know about your investigation," he continued, each word delivered as if from a script. "About the files, your contacts at the SEC." More gasps rippled through the crowd. It was exactly as I had predicted. Genevieve wanted witnesses to my supposed treachery, to create her own narrative before any federal case could break. What I hadn't fully anticipated was the sheer velocity of what came next. Leo's arm swung with shocking speed. The sharp crack of the slap echoed across the terrace like a gunshot, followed by an absolute deafening silence. The force of the blow sent me stumbling sideways, my hip hitting the marble gift table hard. I tasted the metallic tang of blood as my lips split. The cool stone of the floor pressed against my cheek as I lay there, the sting blooming across my face. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Chicago's elite stood frozen, witnessing a violent rupture in the flawless Sterling facade. Then, just as Genevieve started to move, ready to spin this into her narrative, poor stressed Leo, pushed to the edge by his deceitful wife. Something entirely unexpected happened. I laughed. It began as a low chuckle, a bubble of sound escaping my bloodied lips. Then it grew, a clear, genuine laugh that sliced through the manufactured atmosphere of the party like a razor. I pushed myself up, my crimson dress now smeared, and kept laughing. "Perfect timing, Genevieve," I said, my voice carrying across the silent terrace. All those smartphones were still raised, still recording. You couldn't have scripted that any better. Confusion clouded her perfectly composed features. This was not in her program. The disgraced wife was supposed to weep, to cower, to be dragged away in humiliation. "Leo," she snapped, "help your wife. She's clearly having a breakdown." But Leo was frozen, a look of dawning horror in his eyes as the programming began to fracture. He stared at his own hand as if it belonged to a stranger. "What did I just—" he whispered, the vacant look receding. "Ava." I rose to my feet without any help, dabbing at my split lip with a pristine white napkin. The bright red blood bloomed against the linen. "I suggest you all check your phones," I said calmly, addressing the stunned crowd. "You have all just witnessed and recorded a flawless demonstration of the Sterling Conditioning Program, the very same program that is documented in the files I've been compiling for years." I turned to face Genevieve directly, savoring the sight of the first cracks appearing in her composure. 5 years, Genevieve. That was the magic number for Leo to access his grandfather's trust. A stable marriage of 5 years. I smiled, tasting blood. But a public assault in front of 50 witnesses tends to complicate divorce proceedings, doesn't it? The realization dawned in her eyes, followed by an emotion I had never seen there before. Pure fear. "You did this," she hissed. "You provoked him." "I didn't have to," I replied. "You've been programming Leo since he was a child. All I had to do was wait for the right moment and document it." I gestured to the crowd of shocked faces and raised phones. And now, so has everyone else. The intricate puzzle I had spent years assembling, the financial crimes, the psychological abuse, the systematic control of Leo, had just been validated by their own actions in front of the very power structure they had cultivated for decades. My phone is currently sending several interesting data packages to multiple federal agencies, I continued conversationally, including detailed evidence of how Dr. Alistair Finch here helped condition Leo to respond to specific verbal and physical triggers. I nodded toward the therapist, who had gone deathly pale. The physical response programming was particularly effective. Wouldn't you agree, Doctor? The first chime of a news alert sounded from someone's phone, then another and another. My dead man switch had activated the moment my phone's accelerometer registered an impact consistent with a physical assault, releasing my entire evidence package to the authorities and select media outlets. Genevieve's empire wasn't just cracking, it was imploding in real time in front of the very society she had spent a lifetime manipulating. And as I stood there, with blood on my lip and victory in my heart, I knew there was no turning back. "You can't possibly," Genevieve began, but she froze as her own phone chimed with the same news alert that was now spreading like wildfire through the room. Leo stood paralyzed, staring at his hand, then at me, the horror of his own action finally breaking through. His programming was visibly shattering, cracks appearing in the psychological prison that had been built around him. "Ava, I didn't mean to. I don't know why His voice broke, raw, genuine emotion finally surfacing. "I know you didn't," I said softly, addressing him, the real him, for the first time in what felt like an eternity. That's the entire point. I turned back to the stunned audience. These powerful people who had been the Sterling's courtiers for years. The blood on my face gave me a strange sense of authority, the power of undeniable truth. For those of you checking your phones, yes, that news alert is about the Sterling family, I confirmed, my courtroom voice carrying clearly across the terrace. What you just witnessed is the culmination of a multi-year investigation into one of the most sophisticated criminal enterprises in Chicago. Judge Atherton's face had gone ashen. The state senator was already backing slowly toward the exit. I made eye contact with each of them in turn, making sure they understood that their complicity was also documented. The Sterling Foundation has laundered approximately $480 million through its various charitable arms, I continued. Diverting funds meant for inner-city programs into offshore accounts controlled by shell companies in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands. Genevieve's composure was completely gone now. Her manicured hand clutched at her throat, where a pulse hammered beneath a diamond necklace. "You have no proof," she hissed, but her eyes darted desperately toward Dr. Finch, who was inching his way toward the elevator. "Dr. Finch, perhaps you'd care to explain to everyone the meaning of Project Sentinel," I called out, stopping him cold. "The behavioral modification program you've been running on Leo since he was 12 years old, designed to ensure his complete compliance with family directives." Finch froze, his clinical detachment evaporating as 50 pairs of eyes turned on him. "That's privileged, therapeutic information," he stammered, clinging to professional jargon like a shield. "Therapeutic?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Is that what you call conditioning a child to respond to triggers? Programming him to suppress his own will?" I gestured to Leo, who had sunk into a chair, his face buried in his hands. "Would you care to explain the monthly payments of $25,000 categorized as behavioral maintenance in the Sterling private ledgers?" I turned back to the crowd, using every skill I'd honed as a litigator to hold their focus. My evidence package, which by now has been received by the FBI, the SEC, and the Chicago Tribune, contains over 2,000 documents detailing financial fraud, bribery, market manipulation, and most importantly, the systematic psychological abuse of Leo Sterling to maintain control of the family fortune. Julian Sterling stepped forward, his lawyerly mask back in place. "These are outlandish claims from a disgruntled wife. If there were any truth—" "The acquisition of Gentech," I interrupted, naming a deal that had made headlines last year. "Insider trading based on information extorted from a board member. The documents include the original communications, the offshore payment trail, and the exact trading patterns that followed." Julian's face fell. I pressed on, relentless. "The donation to the Children's Hospital last year, the one lauded in every paper, 87% of those funds were funneled through 3 different foundations before landing in an account in Zurich controlled by Genevieve Sterling." I met her gaze. "Account number 7592-1184-2938-002, opened under the name Eleanor Vance, your mother's maiden name." The sheer specificity of the details silenced any remaining defense. In the crowd, phones were now being used to actively search for corroborating information. The evidence I'd spent years gathering was becoming public knowledge second by second. Genevieve, ever the strategist, made a last-ditch effort to control the narrative. "Ava has been under immense strain," she began, adopting a tone of deep concern. "We've been worried about her mental stability for some time. Shall we discuss the surveillance system you had installed in our home?" I countered instantly. "Or the sedatives that were added to my tea on nights I was working late on certain cases? I've had blood work documenting the substances for months." A new murmur went through the crowd. This was calculated gaslighting, and it was a tactic many of them recognized all too well. I turned back to Dr. Finch, who was paralyzed with indecision. "Dr. Finch has a choice to make tonight," I announced. "The federal agents who have my evidence will be very interested in his records." However, I paused, making sure he was listening. "I am prepared to recommend immunity in exchange for his full and complete testimony about the methods used, and more importantly, who authorized them." Finch's eyes widened. A lifeline. "The same offer applies to anyone in this room," I continued, sweeping my gaze across the powerful guests. "Those who come forward voluntarily will be viewed very differently from those who wait for a subpoena." The strategic fracturing of the Sterling alliance was happening faster than I could have hoped. Alliances were shifting like tectonic plates. Leo looked up at me, his eyes clearer than they had been in years, the programming temporarily shattered by the shock. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. How long have you known?" 3 years, I replied quietly. It started with small things, inconsistencies in your behavior after family meetings. Then the vacant spells grew more frequent. Finding Finch's name on the payment ledgers was the final proof. "I never wanted to hurt you," he whispered, genuine agony on his face. "I know," I said, and I meant it. That's why I spent 3 years building a case instead of just walking away. You weren't just a perpetrator, Leo. You were their first victim. Genevieve, seeing her control over him slipping, made one last desperate plea. "Leo, darling, don't listen to her," she shrieked, her voice shrill. "She's turned you against us. After everything we've done for you. After everything you've done to him," I corrected, rising to my full height. "The evidence includes video recordings of the conditioning sessions, Genevieve. Sessions where you personally instructed Dr. Finch on which of your son's personality traits to suppress." Genevieve's face contorted with rage, her mask finally gone. He needed structure. The Sterling legacy had to be protected from his weakness. The naked truth of it silenced the room. Leo stood up shakily. "My weakness," he said, his voice gaining strength with each word, "was wanting to study art instead of finance, wanting to marry for love, wanting my own life." His eyes found mine, and the question in them pierced me. Was any of it real? Between us? Or was that just another script? Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to be cruel. "The beginning was real," I answered honestly. "Before they ramped up the conditioning. I stayed because I kept seeing glimpses of the man you were, enough to know you deserved to be free." The elevator doors at the far end of the terrace opened, revealing 2 men in dark suits who surveyed the scene with calm professionalism. Perfect timing. I recognized my FBI contacts. "Gentlemen," I called out, "I believe several people here are eager to make a statement." The evidence was no longer just data on a server. It was a human drama unfolding across the rooftop as decades of fraud and control unraveled thread by thread. And at the center of it all stood Genevieve, her empire in ashes, her mask of perfection finally and irrevocably destroyed. 6 months after my birthday party became a public indictment, I sat in a federal courtroom and watched Genevieve Sterling being led in, her wrists in cuffs. The designer gowns and flawless makeup were gone, replaced by a standard-issue prison jumpsuit and the sallow complexion that comes from confinement. Yet she held her head high, a queen refusing to acknowledge the ruin of her kingdom. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, former associates, and most importantly, the other victims of the Sterling family's reign. Some were people I had tracked down through financial records. Others had come forward on their own after the news broke. Each one had a story of coercion, manipulation, or financial ruin. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Morrison entered. Not Judge Atherton, who had recused himself immediately and was now under investigation for his role in several of the Sterling's questionable legal victories. The trial moved with the slow, grinding certainty of justice. The prosecution laid out the case, meticulously organized from my files and expanded by the federal investigation. Bank statements, witness testimonies, psychological evaluations, the truth, stark and undeniable under the harsh, fluorescent lights. Genevieve's legal team was a shadow of what it once would have been. Julian had turned state's evidence almost immediately, his self-preservation instinct overriding any family loyalty. Dr. Finch's testimony had been the nail in the coffin. In exchange for immunity, he provided a chillingly detailed account of the conditioning techniques, the specific triggers, and Genevieve's explicit instructions. Leo was not at the proceedings. He was at a specialized treatment facility, undergoing a difficult process of deprogramming and recovery. His legal situation was complicated. He was both a victim and, in the case of the assault, a perpetrator. I visited him once a month, keeping a professional distance while providing him with information that might help his recovery. The man emerging from the psychological wreckage was thoughtful, quiet, and wrestling with a profound sense of guilt. I don't know who I am without their instructions, he confessed during one visit, sitting in the facility's garden. My tastes, my opinions, I'm questioning everything. That's progress, I told him. The authentic self asks questions. The programmed self just follows orders. My own life had been completely transformed. I'd resigned from Thorne Blackwood, unable to go back to defending corporations after what I had witnessed. Instead, I used my own funds to establish the Cognitive Liberty Legal Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to cases involving psychological manipulation, coercive control, and undue influence. Our first clients were former Sterling employees, freed from their coercive NDAs. Soon we were representing victims of other powerful families and organizations employing similar tactics. On the day Genevieve Sterling was sentenced to 28 years in federal prison for racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy, I sat in the back of the courtroom. My personal vengeance was complete. Justice had been served. As the room emptied, Leo approached me, his first time attending the proceedings. He looked thinner, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, his eyes holding a mixture of sadness and new clarity. The trustees approved the restitution plan, he said without preamble. Everyone they harmed will be compensated, including you. I didn't do this for the money, I replied. I know, he said. He hesitated for a moment. That's why I asked them to direct my personal share of the fund to your foundation. It seems right that the money they used to control me should be used to free others. The gesture was profound, an act of autonomous choice, perhaps the first truly independent decision of his adult life. Thank you, I said simply. We stood in a comfortable silence, two people forever scarred by the same toxic influence, now finding our separate ways toward healing. Your foundation's work, he started, then paused. I'd like to help. When I'm further along, my experience, it might be useful. It might, I agreed. We parted ways outside the courthouse, making no promises about the future. I realized then that this fight had never just been about revenge. It had become something more, a reclamation of selfhood, a fight for the right to one's own mind. The path ahead was long, with more powerful figures to confront. But with each case, each client, I was building a legacy, not of control, but of liberation. And that, I decided, was the most perfect form of justice imaginable. End of story.